Okay, and welcome back. Hour number 3. It's our first report of the year 2015 on Fukushima. But more than that, it's a report on what's happening here in the western part of North America. Ultimately, of course, all of North America, as the continuing bioaccumulation presents more obvious signs of die-offs, of really corrupted biology in the biosphere everywhere you look. It's just, there's no way to get away from it. The latest from Japan is really grim. They are now admitting that the corium, that's the melted fuel assemblies, in at least one, if not 3 of the reactors, is now being found floating in the Pacific Ocean. Plutonium from the core assemblies, the fuel rods, those MOX fuel rods most likely. Plutonium is now being found floating in the Pacific. Another story, Fukushima radiation killing off Pacific Coast seabirds. We know about that. Dana Durnford has been reporting on that. His research is coming up with grimmer and grimmer information all the time. Radiation in the North Pacific salmon population will exceed safe limits. Now, this is an interesting admission. It's going to pretty much wipe out the salmon industry, as we told you would happen. These are not surprises if you've been paying attention. Look at the top center column. I put up new stories nearly every day, thanks to Professor Wilcox, especially in Japan. Thank you, Rick, for your contributions, and others. They are very important. This is crazy, and on top of all of it, Japan and Shinzo Abe are moving toward what? The insanity of restarting their nuclear plants. They say, well, we're going to rebuild some of them. They're a little old, so we'll put new reactors in them. The Japanese haven't learned a thing. Nothing. And Ukraine, with one of the largest nuclear reactors in the world, has shut it down after an enormous leak, which apparently went 14 times over maximum safe allowable limits of radiation. But we have nuclear trouble all over the place, and this is just what we know about. Back with us tonight, hopefully we can hear him all right, in Thailand somewhere, that beautiful nation, is Yoichi Shimatsu. Are you there, my friend? Can you hear me?
Well, I can barely hear you. I hope you can hear me. We haven't had some good luck with the telecom lines of late. Besides the holiday traffic overload on the satellites, obviously there's been these solar flares, which have been assisted by the breakdown of the ozone overhead in the atmosphere, and so our phone transmissions have not been too good. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you. You're sounding very good. I'll have Todd turn me up maximum to Yoichi and see if you can hear me.
So the relays are good in your direction, not so good in this direction.
Yeah.
A lot of damage, I think, being inflicted on our satellites, which brings us the whole problem. Fukushima, the radiation is just gradually breaking down everything. All over the northern hemisphere, parts of the southern hemisphere by now. We're moving into a real global crisis of Fukushima. And as you pointed out in this report of plutonium riding on top of the waters of the North Pacific Current, heading over to the United States.
Yeah.
This was really unthinkable to scientists of all sorts, oceanographers, physicists, chemists. But it's happened, and we're seeing that there were releases, as we pointed out very early, that first year, nearly 4 years ago, that there were raw chunks of plutonium radium bursting out of the plant, but also in the releases, these were more than steam releases. We're seeing, nucleotides being released in nearly gaseous, in gas form, in a plasma form, hitting the upper atmosphere, getting very cold up there, and forming these nanoparticles that came down to Earth and also to the ocean. But the amazing thing is, despite their weight and their mass and their fall, they did not sink into that water. In fact, they floated on top of the water.
Yeah.
And I think it has something to do with the fact that they react with the metal of salt in the water. A lot of these isotopes were salt in form, They came down as sort of like cloud, mist down to a heavy mist down to the ocean surface, and somehow were able to form to remain on the surface in suspension. So unlike all the predictions, the plutonium, uranium particles did not sink to the bottom of ocean and be covered by sediment, when in fact they're floating very slowly. This is the heaviest of the material on the surface of the water toward the North Pacific coast, which is devastating. And probably a lot of that material has already reached there, which will explain these massive kill-offs. There's just been another species of birds. They're finding carcasses of these birds from British Columbia down to Mexico, all across the North Pacific coast. Dead birds, no virus detected, no diseases, falling like flies. And again, they were apparently all emaciated. They died of starvation, lack of insects in their feed, and the insects obviously affected by the radiation in their environment. So the kill-off continues. Yet one more species is going down.
Yep. It's
so that's the news of the new year. Not very good. The old year ended really on a bad note. A very powerful earthquake, rocking the heck out of the Fukushima plant, which is basically now defenseless. There were no workers there at the plant. They all took off for the holidays. The Tokyo Electric Power is just thrown in the towel. They're basically not doing anything. There's nothing left to do.
You're right.
Their tanks,
You're right.
their storage tanks are leaking. The ice wall has failed. They're just letting the radioactive water go straight into the Pacific, highly radioactive. They have to let the tanks leak, and they're probably have already started draining some in order so they can weld them back together and refill them. And we're not getting a lot of reports out of there. No one's there. There's not a lot of engineers there. It's just the situation is now total wreckage, and this does not bode well. So, and yet on the other hand, we're getting these reports out of the United States, out of these new TV, online video, online, which are very difficult. Dr. Wilcox traced this one major website, all financed by nuclear industry, saying, well, we don't have to worry about radiation. There's radiation being detected off the coast of off the west coast, but in such low concentrations, we don't have to worry. That's the standard line. That's their only line of defense, in fact.
That's it.
Just really empty reassurances. And now we're finding out there's pellets, there's tiny micro and nanoparticles of plutonium coming across. And so these, it doesn't take many hot particles, a steady wave of these. We see reports saying, everything's going to plateau in 2015, this year and next year. I mean, it's going to peak. And the wrong word is peak. It might plateau, but it's not going to peak. And if anything, on the North Pacific side, it's not going to be good because it's going to be accumulation. It doesn't matter how much is flowing in, because whatever flows in is added on top of what's already there on the beaches and the estuaries and the forests. And it builds up. That's
the whole coastal plain.
So these most unscientific reports on these so-called science websites, science, video programs, completely, just so fundamental, so basically off, into the realm of nonsense. A lot of money behind that, too.
We talk about cesium-134, 137. They're mentioning now, and they're admitting that the melted reactors, the corium, down deep enough to be washed directly into the ocean by the undercurrent of water, the groundwater from the mountains, going down and flowing through the plant, pushing the corium particulates into the ocean. This is just amazing. Yes, plutonium, 239, plutonium 240, but nobody talks about the up to 200 other types of radionuclides, which can also be deadly, which are also being pushed into the water 24 hours a day. Nobody talks about them. Absolutely. I mean, the total sum of it is massive. In fact, some of these nanoparticles have been identified in Ibaraki province and Fukushima province as sort of bundles, which they can't really figure out. Some of these things are not, some of these nuclear isotopes are not
supposed to take solid form. They're supposed to remain a plasma. It's puzzled science at Tsukuba University. They're just puzzled. The stuff is unprecedented. It's in metallic form in not an alloy, but in a, what do you call it, a conglomeration of metals, some of which are not supposed to exist as solid particles, highly radioactive, and present in the soil of Tokyo. This is what's floating in the Pacific, and this completely overturns all the claims that nothing broke out of containment. Okay, that's the claim, the mantra we've been hearing. A lot of the people who repeated that mantra have gone silent. We haven't heard much from them lately. And this is just clear evidence. Containment was clearly cracked open. This stuff is floating across, it's leaking out through the water, and it broke out atmospherically into these nanoparticles, which can float, okay? Which can float despite their heavy mass. They form in suspension with the salt water. There's a lot of, the salt water in the Pacific, as everyone knows who's been to Hawaii and all that, is very dense. It's hard to, you float better there than you would in a lake in the Lake Superior or somewhere. Your flotation is better. And because of that, this stuff is able to float across. So you're getting intact uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, like you say, on and on, hundreds of isotopes in these nanoballs, which the Japanese scientists at Tsukuba said is just impossible to wash out or extract from the soil. They can't figure out how could you to do that.
It's not possible. No way. And they all have different half-lives, all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So
this is deadly new form of radioactive pellet that scientists cannot understand how it's created. It was created out of plasma, obviously. Plasma which suddenly froze when it hit the upper atmosphere.
It's really, this is unprecedented, unique.
Yeah, this is beyond.
We're in no man's land. We don't know.
Yeah, I mean, because you figure the plutonium pieces that got blown out of reactor 3, that Toshiba reactor 3, would have just hit the ocean and sank. That was my initial presumption, and that those particles might affect the Pacific on the Western Pacific, by being pushed along with the current.
Well, they should have gone down into the trench, but they didn't.
Exactly. Some of that did. There are tons of that did, but no one expected nanoparticles of plutonium, uranium, and all these other isotopes, very highly radioactive isotopes with long, very long half-lives, floating across on the North Pacific current. This was unimaginable to all scientists until this report came out, and then the mechanism we know is from that study that was done by Tsukuba University in Ibaraki and Fukushima, which detected these nanoballs and imaged them and all that.
I know, it's amazing. Let's jump up the coast here and see if Dana Durnford is online and standing by somewhere off the British Columbia coast. Are you there, Dana? Can you hear me?
Hi, Jeff. Yes, I can. Thank you.
Hey, Yoshi is here too.
Hey, Yoshi.
Happy New Year to you.
Get your name wrong. Sorry, bud.
Yeah, we were just talking. I don't know if you were listening in or not about what's in the water. Yeah. Right there at the top. God knows how many hundreds of nuclides.
Right.
And some of them seemingly almost let's just imagine we're dealing with the positive and negative polarities of magnets. They're attracted to the algae, the microplankton, and they stick to it. There are all kinds of mechanisms by which this stuff stays up on top or very near the top. It's just not found deep.
Yeah, it's 1/10,000th of a millionth of a meter. It's 1,000 times smaller than the dust that floats around in your home after you clean it spotless.
Wow.
And so this stuff also, because of the salt water they sprayed on the reactors, because everything got smashed up and cut off and 500 miles of coastline was wiped out. There was no way to get in there. They used salt water, and the sulfur created these peroxide hydrogen buckyballs, and they were able to ingest the elements, the particles, the atoms, and they're not solutable in water. And so it was easy for them to transport, apparently. They're very transportable, not only with the ocean, but to the wind, but they will rain out on top of the ocean. They're so light, So it's like a snowstorm, and instead of sinking into the ocean, it piles up on top of the ocean like snow would do on land, but it's on a nano scale, like Yoshi was saying earlier there. And so some of it, of course, will sink and get washed down because it'll aggregate with other particles and will fall down. But because it's so tiny, whatever particle it was usually tiny too, the cold water nutrients will bring it back up to the surface, and if it gets liberated, then it can hang out again. And even the stuff that washed down out of the mountains, everything on the west side of the Rocky Mountains washed towards the Pacific, and on the east side of the Rocky Mountains went towards the Atlantic and the Gulf. Well, that stuff would have come down and could be liberated back onto the coastline and get picked up in rainstorms and deposited back down onto the surface over and over and over. And that's probably what wiped out the phytoplankton, because they hang out at the surface, and that's where they're feeding to and growing up to. And so, that's why we're seeing that annihilation of all the other species. That's why all those birds, they died. There was nothing to feed on because the basis of the food chain, the phytoplankton, the krill, were all dependent upon that zone.
Yeah.
And so the birds that, like I say, 700 kilometers of coastline, I never seen a single flock of birds. And when I finally did, first time, and I know I made a mistake last time, I was saying since May I've been out there. I don't know how I come up with that one. I was out there since the end of June of last year. And Lane came up and visited one of the donors, extraordinarily nice people. She reminded me of that one. Now, the problem is, of course, this has been going on for almost 4 years at this stage. And TEPCO, like you were saying earlier, they had abandoned the plant, and everybody suspects that's been going on for a long time. And this stuff is unmitigated at this stage. There's no way to control it anyway. And nobody really believes they were really storing that stuff. There's like a fable because of the duct tape and all the other things they were doing.
It is.
No indication
It's a fraud. It's just a fraud.
People were working in those areas, so if there was heavy leaks there, they couldn't have worked there. And so it just looks like a picture they painted, same as Building 4, in my opinion. It's just a picture they painted to distract from 1, 2, and 3. And, I watched National Geographic on Fukushima, and they keep referring to Building 4 as just a fire, but the building actually, as you know and everybody else knows, detonated. And I thought that was really intriguing. And Unit 4 had a huge inventory in its fuel pools that detonated and exploded.
Huge.
And went all over that site as you flushed out.
But don't worry, Dana. TEPCO assures us that they've removed every last bit of it from the spent fuel pool. It's all safely gone now.
How do you keep a TEPCO executive out of your back garden? You got to hang one up in your front garden. Like a scarecrow.
Cute.
That's just a joke, folks. Please don't hang them.
Yeah.
Not unless you do it legally, and I'm sure you could if you tried really hard to everybody out there.
It really is amazing. You made a point, and we've been trying to make this point as well, Dana, that the phytoplankton and the krill, but the phytoplankton are everywhere. They are what the smallest species eat, and it goes from there.
The oxygen. And they also sequester carbon. They're the biggest carbon sequesterer out there, the biggest oxygen producer on this planet. And they're the very basis of the food chain. Without them, everything else will fall. That's what we're looking at.
Now, are they actually being eradicated, or are they just becoming irradiated?
Eradicated. They're so small that they can't bioaccumulate it. They actually get popped like a popcorn.
Huh.
They can't come close to it. So if they drift past the elements that are putting out the vessels, they're done. They get fried. And this, these elements, folks, will say a Becquerel is like a grain, flip over a grain of sand. Well, that don't sound like a lot to me or you, but something that's extraordinarily tiny, that's huge troubles. And so these things will do that till the end of time. And so in their lifetime, they can eradicate an amazing amount, just one single atom with isotope in it can, over its lifetime, set free in the air. Of course, when you take a gram, it's more atoms than all the grains of sand and all the beaches combined. And each reactor had around 3,450 assemblies, 80 rods in each assembly. Each rod is 12 feet long. Each rod weighs 18 pounds. So even just a single rod out of 280,000 rods, they were actually in the reactors at the time, the cores of the reactors. When they melted down, the coriums, everything they chewed up around them, the rocks and the metal and parts of the building that fell in on top of them, is also atoms. And different elements. And so they become ionized and radiated too. And so it's like a whole different inventory. And when you spray the salt water on it, those sulfur peroxide buckyballs created from the molecules have become ionized and elemented or radiated elements too. And so we're like when people think of the inventory, they think of the fuel rods themselves, which is just unimaginable. Each reactor, just not counting the fuel pool, but each reactor is around 2 billion times more atoms than all the grains of sand and all the beaches on this planet combined.
Wow.
And so that's enough to give every animal, every human cancer many times over. And cancer takes a long time to manifest. But the phytoplankton, we're talking about a constant invisible snowstorm floating around this planet. And so some people that are really high up in this had said that March, April, May of 2011, everybody on the North America ingested at least 10 radioactive hot particles every day. And a single hot particle is a guaranteed cancer. As Dr. Raymond Gilmedi from Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico that showed by studying killing the beagle dogs for 35 years by making them ingest americium and plutonium, that even the smallest atom would kill the animals in about 4 years, 70% of them, and give them serious tumors, serious cancers.
Yeah.
Of course,
that's why we've had no baby orca beyond 1 year of age since 3/11.
That's a good point, yeah. And
they're on the way out.
Singing, of course.
Yeah.
That's shocking. That's unimaginable. And people just don't understand it. I tell people up here, and it shocks them. And that's something that resonates with everybody because the killer whale, of course, is so famous. That truly is one of the few things that I see can reach into people. But, we'll come up to a commercial, but it sounds of it. I got this whole town here, and I've been stuck up here in bad weather, and I get out for a little bit, and I'm stuck in bad weather, freezing temperatures. Now we got freezing rain and snow, and the weather's just going to break for the next couple of weeks, so really good shape to get out here and hit this coastline, but there's nothing out there, so just documenting it at this stage. Hopefully, by the time I go down the coastline, this planet starts to, try to come up with a future. And just to touch on one more point, you were talking about the studies earlier, how nobody reads the studies. Well, the studies are all locked away, folks. Your universities produce a study, and then Elsevier, Springer, and Wiley, the three biggest publishing houses on the planet with 20,000 outlets, gets the copyrights for free. And that's why nobody can or hear about a lot of these studies, because they're locked away on a paywall. And a lot of these studies could be $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 just to get in there and browse, let alone read.
Very good point.
The average person.
Yeah, very good point. Stand by. Dana will come right back. Okay. Yoshi and I will continue with all of you folks as we step into the year 2015, the year the Pacific died. Be back in a minute. In addition to all of its other troubles, Ukraine is having nuclear reactor problems. On December the 3rd, this is the third largest plant, I believe, or fifth in the world. One of its reactors shut down. It tripped on November the 28th. It was announced on December the 3rd. They didn't go after much in the way of detail to report to us. The actual report was made by Ukrainian Prime Minister Ratsenyuk. And then on December 28th, one of the reactors, the same nuclear power plant, was automatically shut down after another glitch. This was the second halt in operations at that plant in a month. Okay? Now, let's take it another step further. It's hard to get information out of Ukraine. Documents reveal radiation spike at it was the fifth largest nuclear plant. If the government reports are accurate, it's 16 times over the government limit of safe, if there is such a thing. There is no such a thing. It's safe levels of radiation exposure. So that right there is a lie. Whenever you hear about safe levels of radioactivity, forget it. They're lying to you. It's all cumulative. There is no safe exposure to radiation or X-rays or any other kind of ionizing radiation. I think we lost Dana there. Are you there, Dana, or did we lose Yoshi?
No, I'm here. Yeah, that was Yoshi.
Oh, okay. So Ukraine, the fifth largest plant in the world, Dana, 16 times over safe limit. Whenever I hear the term safe limits, I just want to puke. What this government, not yours, but ours, I guess maybe the Canadians did the same thing. What the Obama administration did was raise these so-called safe levels of exposure to scores of radioactive nuclides in the water, in the air, in the plant material you eat, in meat. Don't forget, you eat meat. You're eating the plants.
Side a bit. I'm getting a very weak signal.
Okay, we got you back, Yoshi. I've just been running down the.
Okay.
You got me? Okay, you can hear me, I think. We were just talking about.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
We were just talking about Ukraine, 16 times over the government limit of safe exposure levels. There are no safe exposure levels. This is one of the biggest lies of the whole nuclear age.
Right. Right. You know that. Global. And they're re-nuclearizing in very dangerous ways. Re-nuclearizing thanks to Toshiba Westinghouse. As you know, Westinghouse, that was a company that was essentially by Tesla, became corporatized, and then Toshiba is the majority shareholder, owns about 70% of the shares.
Oh, I didn't know that. All right.
Westinghouse, and Toshiba uses Westinghouse basically to peddle its technology. It's basically it's mock, fuel reactors. It's trying to convert any reactor that can be converted to mock. And Ukraine has four major nuclear plants there with these. They're called VVER. They're pressurized water reactors, which can be converted to mock fuel.
Uh-huh.
And the reason Toshiba Westinghouse wants to convert Ukraine to mock fuel is basically to get rid of plutonium. They need to get rid of all this waste material.
Oh, it's more nuclear waste. Sure.
Pools, around the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, mock fuel is kind of a way to dump nuclear waste on unsuspecting countries, where the political leadership isn't very bright. You give them a reactor, and you say, oh, this is a more advanced kind of fuel up. But basically, you're dumping the plutonium onto them, okay? Your waste plutonium onto them, because there's a lot of waste plutonium there in civilian plants. So Ukraine is very desperate. They're deeply in debt, about $200 million in debt. The IMF and the World Bank had to cut off further lending to them, because they can't make their payments.
They're so bankrupt that it's even funny.
That's the side of Ukraine. One thing you hear in the media is everything is Russia, how bad Russia is. They don't explain what's going on in Ukraine. The country's totally broke. It's been mismanaged. The prime minister, he's a banker. He's a bankster. He's in with the bank. The country's treasury's basically been looted. They can't make any payments, so the guy's going to eat. And they're so desperate now since they cannot save them. But unfortunately, this was a country that was saved by nuclear. If you remember Chernobyl, it was also destroyed by nuclear. So these accidents down at their southernmost plant, it's very difficult to believe. I call Plant Z, the thing begins with Z, Plant Z. You had two successive accidents in December and November, late November and December. The plant.
All right, he's
new Westinghouse, Toshiba Westinghouse fuel rods that were shipped over. They sent over some like 40 rods.
So okay, Yoshi.
So I assume there was no manpower at these plants that had these accidents.
Yeah. Watch out for the buttons on your cell phone.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are not buttons on my cell phone. They're just
They're just tones.
So this is I think the problem in Ukraine is that they're playing around fire here. They're playing around plutonium, purely because of political leadership doesn't have money. They want nuclear power. Nuclear power supplies 50% of their electricity. They run that up to 80-90%. And they seem to be accepting. No one's talking. There's a lot of non-transparency in all of this. But there's apparently their energy minister blurted out something about there's a plan to build one of the world's largest nuclear facilities near Odessa. You know, it's between Crimea and Odessa. And this will be not just mega reactors, but there's going to be a vast waste repository there. Too big for Ukraine.
I see.
So, and it's going to be right near a port. So we can assume this is the trade-off. Ukraine gets Mox fuel technology and fuel rods, very cheap nuclear plants.
And they take all the garbage.
For storing nuclear weapons away from Japan and the U.S. And probably some of that will be the Fukushima, you know, these rods. They'll be buried in Ukraine. This is also Vietnam. They're accepting a raw deal like this, a very, very bad deal. Again, political leadership that doesn't know anything about these issues.
No, just do what they're told, that's all. Oh, hold on a minute, Yoshi, we have to pause. We'll come right back with Dana as we continue.
Okay.
We're putting a story up this evening by Michael Snyder. 11 predictions of economic disaster in 2015 from top experts all over the globe. Okay, well, Snyder's a good writer, so this will be well worth reading. I just got it. Listen, the idea of eating fish. People are still eating seafood. Dana, out of the Pacific. The industry, I don't know what it's down, maybe 5%? That's all. It's surviving. No one's talking. And there are these salmon farms. I don't know, do they have salmon farms in the ocean confined by nets, or is it all inland in holes in the ground?
No, the coastline's got a lot of these things. The big nets out in the ocean, they have a lot of escapes out of those nets. A lot of these salmon are genetically modified salmon, and those whole areas are polluted areas because of all the stuff they put in there, the antibiotics and everything. It's just... Oh,
yeah, they're feeding them all kinds of things. Even cattle blood goes in there. Remnants from pig factories, cow slaughterhouses, it doesn't matter.
They're all great, big, huge animals. I do know they've been laying off a lot of workers instead of increasing it. The future was supposed to be huge on farmed fish, you know, out in the ocean.
Yeah.
And I know people that work in that industry work out there on those farms. As I was coming to the coastline, I got a chance to visit with them. They were telling me that they were surprised because they had built up all these places and bought all these licenses and plants and hired all these people, and all of a sudden they just start cutting back, and nobody really knows what's going on. I think they're predicting themselves what's going on. It's not going to be sustainable. You know, everything we're seeing is the indication that the ocean is well on its way into that extinction level event. Of course, what I'm looking at is just, it's really something to look at that.
You know, I was in a pet store recently, and I used to own pet stores, and I would always be keenly observant of the ingredients in pet foods, most of which is unfit for your pet to even go near, let alone eat. You want to kill your pet off early, feed him commercial grade.
I cook all the meals for Zoe and myself, everything.
There you go.
Every single meal, yeah.
That's it. They should be eating proper, organic, wholesome human food. Now, most of them have, they'll call it salmon, and they make it sound like it's a great thing. But they don't tell you where the salmon comes from. And they don't talk about anything. The only food you dare give your pet is 100% organic food, guaranteed non-GMO. Otherwise you're going to watch your pet fade away years too early. Not fun.
Huge problems with their furs too, yeah.
Yeah.
If you give them GMO, you'll see it right away. Fur gets really dry.
Yep.
Really falling out everywhere. Feed them organic, it'll clean it right up in 3 or 4 or 5 weeks. And, you know, there's already damage done if you've been feeding them GMO, but it's still okay to switch it off and give them normal food, because they will have a relatively normal life after that. It makes a huge difference, yeah.
Exactly.
That's the big thing. People don't even understand how the GMO, how the glyphosates and the formaldehydes, how they stop the uptake of nutrients in the body, and so that applies to your pets too, folks. And your pet, you might be trying to do everything you can right for the pet, but if you slip in that GMO, you're taking away everything good you're doing unknowingly, and that's the problem. That's what makes it so hideous and so demented. The scientists knew exactly. They actually engineered, the calcium, the magnesium, the iron, the cobalt, the carbon, everything out of it, and left just tiny parts per million left over. Like calcium, there was 6,000 parts per million plus in corn, and they engineered it down to 114 parts per million. They engineered out all the calcium, and they've done the same thing with the potassium. And the equivalent is around 400 GMO corn to get the same amount of calcium as in a single organic corn on the cob. So you have to fill up your truck with corn on the cob made by GMO, big and beautiful. In other words, food that doesn't have little rotten patches on it. GMO won't have rotten patches on it very often, but organic has rotten patches, and you got to chop them out, and that's just normal. It's always been that way.
Correct.
And so, when you see that, you're into the organic.
Usually, this stuff in supermarkets looks like it came off the cover of Sunset Magazine. It's just perfect.
Yeah.
And when you see
exactly
perfect,
the way to say it, yeah.
There's nothing there. It's devoid of nutrition. It's full of GMOs in most cases, and worse. The average head of lettuce, years ago, the average head of iceberg lettuce was sprayed 13 times with herbicides and pesticides and God knows what else before it hit the salad bowl. You want to eat that? You want to feed that to your children? Grow your own organically in a covered greenhouse. Get the soil. You got to get good soil and keep it clean. Don't let the rain get on it. If you've got a well, use well water only. You've got to be careful. Dana, you take care of yourself. Thank you very much for the report.
Okay.
Talk to you next week, and you be careful.
I'll be out there. I'm not sure how long I'm going to be on the go. Could be a couple of weeks at a time now, because we got to get the job done before spring. So take care, folks, and thanks again, Jeff. Yeah.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Good night. All right. You there, Yoshi?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah, I wish him a happy New Year. Let's hope his adventures can. He was mentioning the harsh winter weather can resume when it's a little bit nicer outside. The waves aren't so high.
Jeez, he's on that boat.
Not so strong and not so much radiation coming in.
He's on that boat and it's below freezing and it's snowing.
Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of radiation in that. Whatever comes down is bringing stuff in from Fukushima. Fukushima is just spewing out stuff, unrelenting, and no one's even attempting to stop.
They don't have a plan. They do not have a plan.
Serious situation. And coming over it's coming over North America, the Midwest of America. I understand once again massive weather, and once again we can expect those strange late winter weather phenomena that have hit since Fukushima, all these disturbances with the loss of the ozone hole and all the irradiation in the environment. And you were mentioning fish. The Japanese, there's some Japanese, not many anymore, who like to eat their tuna, a very expensive meal, with the New Year, like on the 2nd, 3rd. So they have an auction every year at Tsukiji, the big world's biggest fish market. Yeah. This year, the big tuna fetched $37,000 for one fish. It seems astonishing, but the backstory to that, they used to go for twice or 3 times that much money, okay? Twice or 3 times that much money. So obviously the demand for tuna worldwide in Japan is not what it used to be. In fact, when you go to Japan, you see, even at the cheaper shop, very large servings of tuna. They're trying to get rid of it as much as they can. They get some from the South Pacific. But I think the Japanese public, many of the people who used to gorge on the stuff, spend a lot of money, realize that it's radioactive now. Nearly all tuna in the world is radioactive by now because they're high up on the food chain. So while there are still the enthusiasts who don't seem to care, are not worried about their health, and there are those people who are, let's say, fundamentally suicidal. They could care less. They don't watch it. It's like people who engage in unsafe sex all over the place. There are a lot of people who don't mind dying until they start dying. They don't take any precautions.
Really
They're the
well
ones who are stuffing their faces with all this seafood. And all the other dangerous stuff that you mentioned just now.
Yeah. I'd like to know
as long as it looks good, tastes delicious, they don't care what went into it, They
don't.
The threat that's there. And that's the greatest threat you face. It's ingestion. It's inside your body. It doesn't get more dangerous than that. It becomes your body. Those proteins become their body. And unfortunately, it's bringing in a lot of dangerous stuff. Radiation being the top of the list.
I wonder what the actual percentage of decline in the overall seafood industry is so far. We won't know. We'll never know. They won't tell us. But I just wonder how many people are wising up. They have a string of restaurants over here, as you know, called Red Lobster. There's other string. It's seafood. And I just, I wonder how they're doing. They always look to me like a lot of cars there. So I guess the average, I told you the story. I asked somebody, what do you know about Fukushima?
Yeah.
This is not a dumb some professional. I don't know what I forgot what he did. He said, What?
Well, you don't hear all this environmental outcry about overfishing so much anymore. That means there's a lot less fishing going on. A lot more fishermen can't afford to go out, And even with the lower price of oil, there's just a lot less activity out there because there's more and more people becoming aware of the dangers of radiation, also the dioxin from the plastics in the ocean, and all the waste products in the ocean. A lot more people, they used to think it was the healthiest of all foods, but there's been a real reversal in thinking lately because of all the pollution in the ocean. You was unaware it goes into the seafood. And lobsters and crabs, of course, they're bottom dwellers. It's not really clear because, fish are so watery. A lot of times you don't get the ratings you would get in meat, which is a lot more dense,
right.
On land animals, the meat's more dense, drier. You have a lot more water content. They're washed and all that, so it would reduce the detectable presence, but nonetheless, dangerous stuff in there.
You bet.
Especially the radioactive.
Okay, my friend, that's our hour, and talk to you next week. I hope the coffee plantation is okay.
Happy New Year, and that's more of an expression of hope than it is any indicator of the actual fact on the ground that we face, and in the air and the water that we face in 2015. It's getting worse. That is the news for the year. But Happy New Year. Let's try to do something to make it happier.
All right, will do. Thanks for everything, as always. Talk to you next week. Okay, Yoichi Shimatsu, and I don't know where we'd be without him. And Dana, take care of yourself up there. Freezing, snow, sleeping on his little rubber Zodiac, alone. That's guts, folks. Courage for all of us. Heroism. And we will be back tomorrow night. Talk to you then.